5, 4, 3, 2, 1, live.
Where no van.
Camera's already pointed, right?
Yep, you're all good.
Okay.
Vincent Van Gogh. To boldly go where Van has been going before.
I get it.
Not working on that?
Norm.
Yeah, I saw it already. I saw it this morning. Yeah, but I got
That
it.
was pretty cool.
I didn't want it, but I got it anyway. All right. Well, how's everybody doing? Good to see you here. We got the door fixed finally, and I could not believe how well it went in. I did not do it. Ron did it. I assisted Ron. But we got the new hinges in there, so the door opens up now like it should. Like it should. Wait a minute. That's the first time I've seen anybody have a problem getting in that door. Okay, Ron. Ron messed up then. That's weird. Seriously.
It's more snug. It just basically holds.
It wasn't doing that yesterday. It opened and closed fine.
It's the weather.
It's probably just the fact that it's sagging a tiny bit because we do have to replace some of the screws with longer screws. And I did notice you had some screws up there.
Yeah, he got those yesterday. We just have to take the door off and put them back on.
But other than that, it works fine. It causes the door to open wider now, which allows the wheelchair to come in, which is a nice thing too. Anyway, but yeah, we had a good day, work day yesterday.
Yeah, a lot of
And
work.
the memorial for Menchie's mother-in-law?
Mother-in-law's mother.
Mother-in-law's mother, excuse me. That's right. You were going to correct me. I knew you were right here. But that went pretty good too, I think.
Yeah.
Anyway, so today we're going to be in 2 Kings chapter 12. And by the way, welcome to all those who are watching online. And this is the Adult One Bible Study at Grace Baptist Church. My name is Norm Ellis. I'm glad to have you with us today. And we're going to be in 2 Kings chapter 12. 2 Kings chapter 12. If you got a copy of my notes, outline, looks like this. I know you can't tell online, I'm just being kind of funny here. But this should give you some information that we'll be referring to maybe during our study. Maybe not. Depends on how we go on our lesson, right? But anyway, if you are following along in your lesson book, we are on session number 10 today, which starts on page 91. And we'll be talking about how God honors people who demonstrate God's priorities. God honors people who demonstrate God's priorities. Let's have a word of prayer, and we'll dive right into our study today. Dear Father, thank you so much for your word. Lord, from your word we learn so much. Even from the Old Testament sometimes we tend to ignore, and we shouldn't, Lord. These things apply to our lives today. It's amazing how you designed that in your word. Just pray you be with those that are on their way here to church. Watch over those that are also viewing online. Thank you for all you've done. In your son's name we pray. Amen. So, as the old saying goes, many people don't plan to fail, they just fail to plan. Ever heard that before? And this is the introduction paragraph on page 91. Some may fail to consider how long it will take to complete a project. Others are busy doing many things, but do not prioritize the most important tasks, the most important projects. We might be overwhelmed with the enormity of the task, so we put it off, hoping it will take care of itself somehow, magically. Eventually, we reveal our priorities and the tasks we actually do complete. What we think is important, we get done. And sometimes it is overwhelming. I mean, I'm in a phase of my life called retirement. And so we said, hey, we'll get some of the things done around the house and around the things we got to do, right? And then we can take time off and have fun. Oh my goodness, one thing after the other. It just comes up and my list is getting bigger. And it is overwhelming, can it? Yeah, definitely. And there's an old adage, I think it's from India or someplace like that. How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. So even though it looks enormous, you can do it if you set priorities. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. Anyway, many of us use to-do lists to do that. Anybody here use a to-do list? Some people do, some people don't. I understand that. But some people use it on a regular basis to help keep up in the tasks in their lives. So do you personally find a to-do list helpful?
Yes.
Can it sometimes, though, look like they'll never finish? Oh my gosh, going on page 2, right? So that is one of the problems, and that's why some people maybe don't like to-do lists, because it can then suddenly realize, oh wow, I'll never get this done. But I think personally it's a helpful thing. But there are some people that don't like it, and I understand that. Some of us are to-do list people, and some of us are not, right? So either way, though, we reveal our priorities in the tasks we complete, like we talked about. What we think is important, we want to get it done. Teresa and I are planning a trip to Missouri, and there's certain things you have to get done before you go on a road trip. If you're on a road trip, before you know, you don't want to be partway down the road and break down, have a problem with your car, right? Just shove it really hard. There you go. It's holding a little bit on. I'm going to have to figure out why now, because I wasn't doing that yesterday. I'm a little bit disappointed in that. That's fine. Leave it right there. Maybe. But we put new hinges on it, you see, and I was so proud of Ron and me because we got it and it worked perfect, and now it's just showing me up today. It's saying, that's what you think.
I'm going to blame those screws. Once I put the new screws in, they'll be fine.
Yeah, it must be the screws. That's what the screws. Anyway, so we're talking about priorities in our life and what we think is important to get done. And on our road trip, we know that we got to get our car ready. So my car was due its inspection for 65,000 miles. But I had to get it done, and because we're going to be leaving in a little while, and so we got to make sure it's good to go, right? If we're not, we're going to be stuck with the consequences. So that's a priority of mine. So I don't want to break down the road and send my wife on down the road with a gas can. No, I wouldn't do that. You're going to say something, Cece?
Well, I was going to ask, because I saw what I thought I saw for an extra. Oh,
Do you need one?
yes, please.
What you need?
A book.
Oh yeah, we have some books. Do you need an attendance thing, Tina, or do you already?
I already got it.
Oh, wait. Great.
I'm on it.
By the way, we're getting close to the end of our unit. When we finish August, we'll be in September, and that'll be our new unit. I do have new books already, and I won't be here that time. But whoever's substituting for me, they'll have access to the books, so you'll be able to get one. Well, we have a minor spillage. That's okay. We have linoleum in here, so don't worry, it won't hurt a thing.
That's just my brother's tea.
Make sure you move your stuff that's laying beside there.
Can I see at least I didn't do it?
That's right. You guys keep talking and go, and I've got this.
That's fine. Alrighty. Anyway, so back on track. We gotta get back on track of our tasks. We gotta have our tasks to get our tasks here. How do you decide on what tasks need to be done next?
Priority?
Priorities, okay. What's important, right?
Yeah.
What has to be done, right? Sometimes these things that don't have to be done, though, they rear their heads earlier than we expect. So we have to be on point for those things as well. And what kind of criteria do you use to set your priorities? Criteria is a standard or a measure.
What's coming up?
Yeah. What's coming up, approaching, right? Maybe what's cost a lot of money if you got a budget for it. Different various things like that. Yeah, those things matter. And when we set these criteria for our things, what does that say about our priorities? What's important, right? This is what's important. So today's study, we're going to be talking about how King Joash, had priorities in his life here. And this study should help us to better understand how God honors those people who demonstrate priorities that reflect His priorities. Now, sometimes that's a hard thing, right? Because, what people basically are? What are people basically?
Creatures of
Well,
habits.
we're creatures of habit. Well, you can say lots of things, but we're primarily eye-centered, aren't we? It's nature. It's natural. It's that's how we preserve ourselves, right? We don't want to get hit by cars, so we move ourselves out of the way. Well, things like that, right? We don't want to starve, so we eat food. So that's natural, and there's nothing wrong with that. But we are eye-centered a lot of times, right? So we need to be centered as Christians on God first. That's what we're talking about here. So in our context, talk us about understanding the context, and I think it's kind of confusing, some of these things that's going on. But Elijah and Elisha had focused their ministries on the northern kingdom. We knew that, right? The area north, which is called Israel. But today we're talking about Joash, the king of Judah, I think, if I remember right. Anyway, I'm going to point out something here. What was it now? We talked about Jezebel already. That was prior in the showdown at Mount Carmel. Now we're looking at from the northern kingdom to the southern kingdom of Judah and King Joash. There we go. So when Judah's king Jehoshaphat died, his son Jehoram or Joram became king. Joram was married to this lady, a bad lady too, Athaliah. I'm not sure how to pronounce that. I should have asked our pastor before he left the room. Athaliah. Shouldn't be that hard to pronounce, but I have a hard time with it. Anyway, and this king, though, King Joram, he brought Baal to Judah. And it was upon his death that his son became
Ahaziah?
king. Not what?
Ahaziah?
Yeah, that's it. He continued this Baal worship, okay? And when he died, his mother, now this mother is an evil person. I'm going to ask the pastor here to pronounce this for me. Athaliah.
Call her Athilia or Attilia.
Athilia. That sounds about right. Anyway, she decided, now's my chance. I'm going to rule this place. I'm going to be the queen of Judah. People will be bringing all wealth to me. I'll be in charge. I'll be large and in charge, right? And she was an evil person. And some of the things that she promoted were not good. Anyway, she pronounced a death sentence on all of David's male descendants. So that's not a good thing.
What a grandmother.
Yeah, what a grandmother. These were heirs to the throne. Indeed, all of them were killed, except they missed one kid. One-year-old boy named Joash. Similar to the story of Moses, the young boy was hidden away for his own safety. Joash's aunt, Jehoshaphat, who was married to a Hebrew priest named Jehoiada, hid Joash along with his nurse in the Jerusalem temple. That'd be the last place an evil person like her who's committed to Baal worship. She probably wouldn't she wouldn't want to go near the temple, right? So that's where they hid him. And he stayed there for 6 years until just before Athaliah's disastrous reign was brought to an end. In those formative years, Joash was taught by Jehoiada the priest. Think about that. For 6 years, he was taught by the priest in the temple. Did that probably help him? I think it probably did, yeah. Probably a big advantage there. So he came to the throne at the ripe old age of, do our math, 1 plus 6, 7 years of age. So that's interesting in itself. We know that probably he had a lot of advisors, right? I know I couldn't rule anything, let alone a kingdom at 7. But that's where our context brings us to that point here. So we're going to see that King Joash assigned tasks and made it a priority to complete the repair work of the temple. And our first verse that I'm going to look at is 2 Chronicles 24:4. I don't know. Did I hand that out to anybody? No, I did not hand that out to anybody.
That one?
I thought I had it already here.
I got it ready to go more or less here. 2 Chronicles 24:4.
I thought I had it here. I don't have it here. Go ahead. You got it already?
Now it came about after this that Joash decided to restore the house of the Lord.
Yeah,
Is that the one?
I know I had that somewhere here. Okay. Yeah. And there's a translation I wanted to read it from. And I'm trying to find where I did it. Oh, I probably put it here. Would I have done that? Yes, I did. At the bottom of the second page of handout number 1. 2 Chronicles 24:4. Afterward, Joash took it to heart to renovate the Lord's temple. Now, I don't know what term your translation used. What was that?
Restore the house of the Lord.
Took it to heart?
It came about after the Josiah decided, with the footnote of was with a heart too.
Right. There we go.
His heart was set on it.
Yeah. It was not just something, well, I think I'll do this before I go on my vacation. Okay. It was something that was a heartfelt thing for Joash. Why do you think it was?
Because the priest was teaching.
Yeah. Where did he grow up in? The temple.
It was 7
So
years
he
ago.
saw firsthand what had happened to the temple. The temple had been brought into disrepair. Basically, had been allowed to fall apart. Things had been taken from it. Different utensils and things that were part of the sacred worship time and stuff like that had been stolen and actually given away to the people. I can't remember the detail on that, but it needed a lot of work. So he became king, and he felt it in his heart that what we need to do, we need to make this a priority, we need to fix the Lord's temple. And that's kind of cool, isn't it? If you think about that. So this had, like I said, the temple had been neglected for years, and these repairs had to be done. So let's look at this. Our first point is today is the problem. The problem. We got the problem, the solution, and the action. The problem is verses 4 through 8. The solution is going to be 9 through 12, and the action is 13 through 16. And again, remember our main point, God honors people who demonstrate God's priorities. So let's look at this first one. And for these first 5 verses, I want you to listen to how well the initial plan for repairing the temple worked. And I do have one more verse. Who would like to read this verse for me? It doesn't have a verse to read. Oh, I see that hand. That's not the first one, by the way, so don't worry. You have a chance to look at it. So, who's got number 1?
I do.
Go ahead and read that.
Then Joash said to the priest, all the money of the sacred things which is brought into the house of the Lord in current money, both money of each man's assessment and all the money which any man's heart prompts him to bring into the house of the Lord. Let the priests take it for themselves, each from his acquaintance, and they shall repair the damages of the house wherever any damage may be found. But it came about that in the 23rd year of King Jehoash, the priests had not repaired the damages of the house. Then King Jehoash called Jehoiada, the priest, and for the other priests, and to them, why do you not repair the damages of the house? Now therefore take no money from your acquaintances, but pay for the damage of the house. So the priests agreed that they would take no more money from the people, nor repair the damages of the house.
So, a lot of times we have projects, and we, set up a schedule to do it, maybe get people to do certain parts of it. It might be renovating a house. She's not even listening.
I'm listening. I was reading the
Anyway,
words.
you get people to come do the floors or the windows or stuff like that, and you suddenly realize, that window looks a little off. Wait a minute, that floor doesn't match this part over here. And you realize what?
You got problems.
You got problems. You got problems, right? And so this is what had kind of happened here. He had set up, he said, okay, we're going to do this, and everybody's on board. By the way, priests, you serve the Lord, so guess what? Your responsibility. Delegation. That's all. The king can't do it all himself, right? So he delegated this, right? So he delegated to them this task of repairing and bringing the temple back up to standards, if you will. And he said what? What was going to happen? Said to the priests, all the money from the sacred things which is brought into the house of the Lord in current money, both the money of each man's assessment and all the money which any man's heart prompts him to bring to the house of the Lord. Let the priests take it for themselves and make sure everything gets done. Right? So he trusted them to do that. So they agreed that they would do this, right? This would happen. And what happened then? Was there any problems with that?
They didn't repair the house.
But we're going to see that here in the next part, I know. But I was trying to find, I think it talks a little about that here.
Doesn't it have something to do with the fact that at one point all the money had gone to the priest?
Yes.
For their food and their housing,
Yes.
and then all of a sudden...
They were using it for other things.
Yeah.
The priest said, okay, we've been given this responsibility. You know what? Yeah, I know we need to repair the temple, but we got to get our own food over here. And we got to take, oh, you know what? I gotta go over to Bethel on a trip. I need some money for that. Okay, I'll go take care of the trip to Bethel. Or, oh, shoot, I need new drapes in my place. I'm using a little bit of the money to do that because I'm a priest and I'm trustworthy. They can trust me, right?
It was all been used for God's service.
It's all been used for God's service, that's right. And so what had happened was it didn't get done like the king wanted. Now remember, this wasn't just something the king decided on a whim to do. It was his heart, right? It was a deep thing. And he realized when he saw some of these things happening that it wasn't going according to plan, right? Mm-hmm. But anyway, he talks about 3 sources of silver. It's kind of interesting. Did you catch that in verse 4, I think it was? I think I was going to bring that point up here.
All the money for the sacred things?
Yeah.
Which was brought.
Where was that point I was going to talk about? Oh, well. But there's these purposes that you have to bring offerings for at different times. One of them was a regular assessment. One of them was when you come to the temple, you had to do certain things when you bought your sacrifices and things like that. And the other one was basically we would call a free will offering too, if I remember right. And so all these sources would be part of it. And they agreed they would take no money from the people nor repair the damage to the house. So the priest agreed that they would take no more money from the people nor repair the damages of the house. What does that mean? What do you think that means? Verse 8.
Some pastors aren't good at leading building projects.
Well, it says Joash instructed the priests further. It says, take no more money from your treasuries. It's kind of a better way of looking at that. And the word treasurers. And he was relieving them of all their duties at this point. He says to oversee this task. He instructed them, but handed over instead for the repair of the temple. The king would then assign a task to faithful workers who would ensure the task's completion. So they all agreed, right? They all agreed. Did they have much choice? It would be like in the military when the commander comes and says, "You know, I'd really like you to, do such and such in this hangar before our ceremony." Maybe I'll do it. Maybe I won't. No, the commander said it. You do it. You do it quickly. You do it twice as good. So this kind of thing. So they had to do that. It was their task to do it. So the leaders were now accountable to the king, right? And the leaders had to do their tasks correctly. But do all leaders follow what their boss tells them to do? Not necessarily, right? So we can see that's what happened. It goes on to say in the commentary about this, when leaders do not give tasks their due priority, others may assume the tasks are not important. Further, when leaders fall into sin, those who follow them sometimes rationalize their own failures by pointing to their leaders' failures. We must set a good example for those we lead. And the priests were not doing that. The priests had basically not taken to heart what the king had said. So the king and the priest came to agreement, and we needed to do something better, basically. A new solution was needed. Joash had made a new plan for getting the temple work done, and Jehoiada and the other priests now are on board for that. So let's look at that. Let's look at what happens next here. So in these next verses, I want you to listen for Joash's new plan for paying the temple repairs. The original plan sounded good, but something was wrong in the execution. What was wrong in the execution? Some corrupt middle management, maybe?
Yeah.
I've never seen that before. No. Well, let's look at what happens here in these next verses. I think it's number 2. Who's got number 2 for me? Solution, it's called.
But Jehoiada, the priest, took a chest and bored a hole in its lid and put it beside the altar on the right side as one comes into the house of the Lord. And the priests who guarded the threshold put in all the money which was brought into the house of the Lord. When they saw that there was much money in the chest, the king's scribes and the high priest came up and tied its bags and counted the money, which was found in the house of the Lord. They gave the money which was weighed out into the hands of those who did the work, who had the oversight of the house of the Lord, and they paid it out to the carpenters and the builders who worked on the house of the Lord, and to the masons and stone cutters, and for buying timber and hewn stone to repair the damages to the house of the Lord, and for all that was laid out, other expenses for the house to repair it.
So yeah, the term "all was laid out," that's what it means. It means other expenses for the house. So we have a new plan in place. And the head priest is going to make sure now that the other priests are going to toe the line here. Because guess what?
It's on him.
It's on him. That's right. And he does something, we see the mechanics of it, which is quite interesting to me. The chief priest does what?
Makes a piggy bank.
Makes a big piggy bank, yes. Now, it says he took a check. We don't know exactly how big this thing is, but it's probably a pretty massive, pretty large thing. And basically you put stuff in this hole, and you cannot reach in and grab it out. It goes in and stays in until such a time as they probably have a lock of some sort and unlock and take it out and account for it. So there's a lot better system now. Now they have full accounting. It's kind of like when you're counting money upstairs, right? Those of you who've been involved in counting the money for the church. What do we do up there?
There's two people.
Two people. We check each other, don't we? Yeah. And there's a witness to each what we're doing, and we write it down, and it's put away into a pouch. It's locked, I think. Maybe it's
Yes, no,
Locked and delivered, right?
it's locked in the file cabinet.
Yeah.
And even at that point, we go further. Matthew has no idea,
Right.
right, of who gives what, of how much is given until he asks me, and then I have to look it up.
What was the amount last month?
Yeah. And we just have accountability.
Right, and that's a good way to do it.
Yes.
Churches should be accountable. It should be a transparent thing that people know, hey, when I give money to whatever cause that is that in our church, it's being accounted correctly, and it's not being used for something that it shouldn't be used for, right? And so now we see that there's more of that accountability. That's the word I was going to come up with next here. So we see evidence of accountability in verses 95 through 96. What was that evidence? 95.
95.
No, I'm talking about page. Excuse me. Ooh, that was dumb. Page. If you want to look in your book, that's what I was going to say. If you look in your book.
Page 95, 96.
Oh, here's the thing I wanted to talk about, the silver. It's in my notes in the book. All right, I'm going to touch on that really quick. The money came from three sources. The money collected in what they call the census. Okay, there was a half shekel that each man aged 20 or above was to bring annually to the temple. And although this was originally a one-time contribution, that had developed into an annual tax. Anyway, second was the money received from personal vows that people promised to give to the Lord. And all this is also based on Leviticus chapter 27, this part. And these were special offerings that expressed the person's thankfulness to God. And the third was money brought voluntarily to the temple. The tradition behind this gift was a free will offering, also described in Leviticus 22. And this offering began as an animal presented for the sacrifice to the tabernacle, and it transitioned to be in the form of silver by the time of Solomon's temple. So that was the definition of those three things, and I want to make sure I read that part too. Anyway, back to the other thing. Page 95 and 9 through 90, what did I say, 6, has information that we can read a little bit more about the accountability that we see in Joash's new plan. So what evidence do we see? Look at these verses again, verses 9 through 12. Actually, yeah, 9 through 12.
Say the question again.
What do I have some evidences of the accountability now that's built into this new plan, this new solution?
We already talked about, of course, the closed box
Right.
hole.
Yeah, it's more of a bank, right? A secure thing, and everyone can see it. Again, it's a big. What?
They had two people count
Ah,
it and bag it up.
yes, they did, didn't they?
The king's scribe
Uh huh.
He
and
divided
the high
powers.
priest and the high priest. So you got one from each
Yes.
area.
Yes, one that represents the king, one represents the temple. So you see, both interests now have accountability to the other person. Isn't that interesting? So does it sound familiar? Our church does that. I was going to point that out. Our church follows that example, and it's a good example. You don't want the king to do the counting or the priest to do the counting, but they can observe what's going on, and those are the ones that are making sure, double checking each other. That's good. Anything else? I think that's pretty much it. They would count it out. They would also have an assessed value. They had a way of measuring the silver. They would weigh it, and they would physically determine its value that way. And all that was done in full view of the others of people who were accountable then. Anyway.
They highlighted that the priests were also serving as guards.
Yes.
So there was a guard around the chest.
Yes. They were watching.
They made
It
sure.
says at the entrance.
Yeah, they made sure that the people got the money in the right spot. It's in a very public location, so there was no pilfering and things like that.
You think that's a way to honor God? Sure is, right? Because those resources that God gave us, in this case silver or whatever money type things, they were to be used for God's purposes, and people can now see that's what's happening. So what would be the outcome of that? Let's look here. We talked about accountability. That starts with A. There's another word that starts with A that we see that came up because of, apparently, the accountability factor now. What was that?
Abundance.
Abundance, yes! We see an abundance. In verse 10 it says, when they saw that there was much money in the chest. Now, I made that in bold print on my copy here. In other words, it was more than they thought was going to come in. How about that? What does that tell us about when we give? And especially when we know that there's accountability and it's going to be used for the proper way. What does that do for people who are giving? Gives them what?
People like a little transparency.
Yeah.
It inspires them to.
Yeah.
You know,
Does it give them confidence?
Mhm.
Yeah. Gives them confidence in the fact that God's money is being spent properly.
I know that I'm very choosy about to whom I give my charitable donations, to use a cultural term, right? I mean,
Yeah.
I love the Air Force, but I don't tithe to the chapel because they use it for the pagan ministry as well.
Yes, they do.
So I love my military, and I'm going to serve them. I'm going to take care of them as a chaplain. I'm a chaplain for every people. But the money that I set aside for the Lord, I want to make sure it goes specifically to the Lord and His work. And so that's why, you know, I'll support the missionaries who work with the missionary or with the military, and I'll of course support my church, and I'll support the other things that we know that take care of God's service and not just give charitable donations to a secular group.
Mm-hmm. Now, it doesn't say how old King Joash was at this point. He wasn't 7 anymore. I know that. He was older. But it does show something about him, this new solutions. What does it show? I think he inherited maybe a little bit from his granddaddy Solomon.
He had some wisdom.
Wisdom, maybe? He's showing some wisdom here, doesn't he? Yeah. This is a good idea. It's so good that we're still using it today, aren't we? Yeah. Now, sometimes, you know, it kind of always, what's the word I'm looking for, amazes me when I start thinking, well, I don't know, you know, we're a small church, I'm not sure we can tackle that, and when we start to tackle it, and you know what? It gets done.
Abundance.
And you suddenly realize, I can't outgive God. You know, I can't do it. And there's certain principles we see, especially in the New Testament, talk about this. And one of them is in Luke 6:38. Who has the number 3? I think it is 6:38.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Jesus said, "Give, and it will be given to you. They will pour into your lap a good measure, pressed down, shaken together, and running over. For by your standard of measure, it will be measured to you in return."
So Jesus is trying to teach a principle here as well, and it's a principle we see reflected in what happened in this story, isn't it? Give, and guess what? You'll be given to you. Now that doesn't mean we give to get gold or silver. A lot of the things we receive from the Lord are non-monetary, okay? And those are the things that really have no price, because in your life you realize certain things are incalculable. But when we do things like support certain ministries and we see the fruit of that ministries, what does that do for us? We realize, yeah, we've been blessed. Right, we've been blessed by God. And this principle is a good principle to remember. We cannot outgive God. You know, you give and guess what? In return, it's going to be pressed down, poured into your lap, pressed so hard you try to get it to all fit. It won't fit, it falls out. You know, this is a picture of what? God's blessing in abundance, right? And so this is what they're experiencing. They didn't think they'd get this much return this quickly, apparently, but there was much money, more than they thought should have been in there. You know, it's one of those kind of things where you wonder, how did this happen? God, that's how it happened, right? God is how it happened. So we see we can't. When we give sacrificially to God's work, we find out we cannot outgive God, and that's just one of these principles it goes by. And there's a lot of stories of that are not stories in the sense they're accounts. One of the ones my favorite is the one of J.C. Penney. You may or may not know that name. There's a store named after him. You know, and he made it a goal in his life that whatever money he got, he would take a percentage of that and give it right back to God. And I guess at the time he was had all these stores and stuff starting up, he was giving like 50, 60%, I don't know what it was. Some amount that people would say, you can't do that and survive. And he did. God blessed him. And his stores thrived. And more money would come in. And it was like, you can't outgive God. You know, and that's what he would say. I give because I'm supposed to, but you can't outgive God. God's going to bless, and he always did. And it was kind of one of those stories that you hear, and it's a true thing, a true account from him. Anyway, question, how do people's financial practices reveal their own priorities? How do people's financial practices reveal their priorities?
They spend their money.
Yeah.
Shows what we want, what we're willing to sacrifice for.
What's important to us? That's kind of what we're getting at here, right? When we see somebody who's really, oh, well, I'll give a few dollars here when the plate goes by, and that'll be enough. Versus somebody who freely gives, not realizing, you know, the fact that God's going to bless them some more later on, and God does, you know, because they're giving sacrificially. It's an amazing thing. But how we give is just an indicator of sometimes of where our priorities are. I'm not saying it totally is, but it can be, right? Can be. People's generosity, though, we see in this account here, was an indication of two things. Two things here. First, the temple, its upkeep, and the proper worship of God had become a high priority for the Israelites. It had become something that they wanted to see as well. It wasn't just King Joash. Joash was the inspiration for everybody else, I think. They saw what the king wanted to do. They saw what the neglect the temple was in, and they got on board and said, we're going to support that. And before you know it, more money came in than they expected, right? So that was the first of these two things, the generosity. Second is Joash's solution worked. So those, when people see that something like that is happening, do you think they want to be part of that? And they did, didn't they? Yeah. We should want to be a part of furthering God's kingdom, right? And where we're located here, in this part of Vancouver, we have an excellent opportunity to do that. There's people all around us that don't know about Christ, right? We have people just a stone's throw away that don't know anything about the Lord, you know? And we have opportunity because we live right here, and we can do something about it. So, well, just to throw it out there, look for those, you know? Find those areas that you can help to reach the people for God, right? That's something we can do. And it doesn't even cost us hardly anything to do that. Anyway, in 2 Chronicles 24:10, we find these details. All the leaders and all the people rejoiced. They brought the tax, they put it in the chest until it was full. The people gave joyfully and in abundance. And there's another, and I can't remember where it is, and it really bugs me because I thought of it and then I forgot it and I thought of it again. But God loves what?
Cheerful giver.
Cheerful giver. And I think that's a New Testament quote.
That's
I think
Paul's,
one of Paul's letters. God loves a cheerful giver. And this is what we're seeing here. Are these people cheerful? They're expressing joy, right? Because they saw that God is blessing. God is blessing. Kind of neat. And you're looking it up. You already know the verse.
2 Corinthians 9, 6, and 7.
That's okay. We knew it was in there somewhere. Thank you. Let's look at the next part here. In our last step, action. We talked about the problem, we see a solution to it, and the action. The action. 13 through 16 is the verses we're going to look at next. In 2 Kings 12. And for these last four verses, I want you to listen for details of how the money collected would be used. How was it going to be used? Who's got that one for me?
I have
You got that? Okay.
The money brought into the temple was not spent for making silver basins, wick trimmers, sprinkling bowls, trumpets, or any other article of gold or silver for the temple of the Lord. It was paid to the workers who used it to repair the temple. They did not require an accounting from those whom they gave the money to pay the workers because they acted with complete honesty. The money from the guilt offering and sin offerings was not brought into the temple of the Lord. It belonged to the priest.
So we see that the actions here is reflected, right? And what details do we see on how this money was collected and how it would be used? So the question is, what evidence of integrity do we see in the handling of money in Joash's new plan? Integrity. Now we talked about accountability, we talked about abundance, but there's another word, integrity. There's a certain amount of trust in that word, right? That's what we're talking about here. And the people who did the work were entrusted with this task. And we're talking about specifically, what was it listed? Was it listed there? There was the carpenters. Oh, that was the one before. The carpenters, the masons, and the stone cutters were the three primary ones they mentioned in the previous verses there. But these people were honorable people, okay? And they were chosen to work on God's temple for a reason. You think they would have chose people that maybe they couldn't trust to do that? They were trustworthy people, right? They were people that the king and the priests and stuff, they said, we can trust these people to do that work. And so we see what was happening here is once they found out how much money was coming in and they could do this, they started funding this repair work. And now the priests might have said, wait a minute, we need these bowls and these utensils to do some things. So let's take some of this money and do this. But that's what happened before, right? And the money wasn't spent properly. This time, the people who are actually fixing the walls, fixing the porches, fixing the pool, whatever it was, they had these ceremonial places and stuff all around it. And doing all these things that need to be done, they were being paid directly. So people saw that as well. There's this transparency of what was going on. So as far as evidences of integrity, what do you see there? That aspect, right? It was given directly to them. Directly to these stonemasons, directly to the stone cutters, the carpenters, and stuff like that. And once they gave it to them, it's like when we're working on a work day, in a lot of ways, and we go to pick up some materials at Lowe's or Home Depot, right? We're trustworthy agents of the church. We're getting this material. We're coming back to fix whatever it is, the door, whatever it might be. And there's nobody standing over us at that point and saying, do it this way, okay, I see you, okay, fine, okay. They're being trusted. We're being trusted when we purchase. I could buy a pound of nails and keep it for myself. I'm being trusted that I'm not going to do that. Essentially, that's what we're talking about here. These were people that were entrusted with these tasks, this sacred tasks of rebuilding this temple, this place of worship for God, right?
And it says that they were beyond suspicion or accusation.
Yes, exactly. So that's what in being a person of integrity, right? That's what we're seeing here. And it did not require an accounting. That's something that just jumps out at me here.
Another old New Testament phrase that I think of is they were above reproach.
Yes, above reproach. Above reproach. I like that term. So, anyway, if you want to read more about that in the lesson book on page 97 through 98, verses 15 through 16. I got it right this time. You can read more about that integrity that's talked about there. Anyway, so this story is a reminder that handling our money and financial obligations with biblical integrity bears witness of our Christian faith. It really does. The Lord is honored when we honor Him with our resources, and in turn, God honors that type of integrity. Matthew 6:19 through 21. Somebody, I think, has that one for me.
Yes, I do. Jesus said, "Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and rust destroy, and where thieves break in and steal. Store up for yourself treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust destroy, and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also."
So again, we see the mention of heart here. Remember that verse we first talked about in Chronicles? There it is. Afterward, Joash took it to his heart to renovate the Lord's temple, right? Kind of reflects that in a way, doesn't it? Where was Joash's heart? It was in the repairing of God's temple, right? Where was the people's heart when they saw that they could be the offering was being used correctly? Same thing, wasn't it? And we see that reflected all the way down the line. This is a good idea of leadership. Good leadership. When good leadership inspires the people below them to do those good things, right? And that's what King Joash was doing. So that was a good thing. A real good thing, right? And does it bear witness of their faith in God? In the same way this verse we just talked about here from Matthew, when Jesus is talking about treasures, he's talking about those things sometimes that are intangible. In other words, not necessarily those things you can grab a hold of. So we can take this story, this account, and we can extend it to us as well in those intangibles. You know, when we want to try to store up things for ourselves on earth, we realize, you know, they're not going to be there when we die. You know, when we're gone, those treasures remain.
There's a reason you don't see a luggage rack on a hearse.
Yeah. Now, I think we heard a story last week from, was it you?
Derek last week.
Derek. about the guy that was able to bring a little knapsack with
Brought his luggage to heaven, yeah.
brought some luggage to heaven,
Full.
and he got up past the gate and he said, "Well, we got to check what's in that luggage." And he opened it up, and it was some bars of gold. And the guy just laughed at him. Says, "What do you bring paving stones to heaven for?"
Would you call it paving stones?
Yeah.
Yes.
Paving stones? Okay.
Streets of gold.
Streets, in heaven, the streets are paved with gold, so
Oh,
it didn't
okay.
do him any good. He thought he'd have riches, and he had so it was pretty much common.
I'm gonna be set when I get up there.
So your heart, though, that's what we're talking about here, right? Where your heart is, right? And that those kind of things can't be destroyed by moth or rust or any of those things else. Anyway, any comments or questions about that? Does that make sense? Follow what we're talking about? I hope so. So, question asks, how may a church bring honor or maybe shame to Christ's name by the way it oversees its budget? Kind of talked about that already, I know, right? If we have accountability, we have transparency, does that bring honor? It's the same way if you have just a certain person doing it all the time, that can bring the opposite, right? Can bring shame. One of Christ's picks for an apostle was Judas. Okay, but that was for a reason. We know that, right? But Judas was known for something. What was he known for?
Robbing.
Yeah, he was in charge of the money bag.
Yeah.
You know, he would use that for himself. He would pilfer, it said. So, anyway, we want to make sure that we have do the things we do to honor the name of Christ. Is what it comes down to. All right, no questions or comments. We'll line it up then. For a change, we'll be out on time, maybe. All right. So the three summary points from our message, or summary, or studies, I should say, today, is that leaders are accountable for their actions, right? Leaders should be accountable for their actions. Shouldn't be done in secret. These things should be out in the open, transparent. Second, God expects His people to take care of their own financial obligations. Is that a good witness to other people? We see that we're doing correctly in our own lives? Yeah. And the third is that Christians' integrity in business can further the case for God's kingdom. And I wouldn't say just integrity in business, but integrity in life. Integrity in what they do in life with the resources that God has given us. There's an old-fashioned term now, but are we good stewards? Because if you think about it, as a steward just takes care of something for somebody else, right? We're not keeping the stuff we have with us. We're going to leave it behind. So are we taking care of it the way God wants us to? Are we being that good steward of what He's given us? All right, so what are some ways that our financial practices may open the door for sharing the gospel? What do you think about that question? It's kind of a reflective question. Can it do that?
Yes.
Yes, it can. It can. I had a friend of mine, co-worker, interesting fellow. But anyway, I won't go into too much detail about it. But he was convinced in a dream that me and him bought this lottery ticket. And when we did, we won the big lottery. And so he was convinced that we had to do that. And I said, I'm not going to buy a lottery ticket. I mean, you can buy it and put my name on it if you like. No, my dream, it had to be this way. I mean, he was adamant. It was almost a little bit psycho.
He was afraid with things like that.
Yeah, and so, but he was mad at me because I wouldn't do that. But I can't do that. I see that as not using God's finances correctly, But I'm not casting dispersion on anybody who might play the lottery. So I'm just using it as an example of what happened to me. And so, from that point on, he kind of
Unless God flat tells
What?
you to do it.
well, that would be interesting to me if that
Yeah.
happened. But I don't think
Well,
so.
that's what I mean.
Yeah. Anyway, but it was interesting. He treated me differently after that. So I mean, not necessarily a bad way. Just as it was different. It was just different because he knew where I stood on certain things. So I'm saying is our life, how we do that thing, will reflect and cause people to notice and maybe be changed too. So keep that in mind as we sum up this lesson here. So as Christians, we need to be mindful on how we do that because our financial practices can impact our witness. So the challenge from our study today is to reflect on how we can foster accountability in our own lives and be more mindful of the impact of our actions on others that observe and model us. Do you think people observe and model you? You might think, no, they don't. They do. They do. Again, I've had people come to me in work situations where I never thought they'd come to me. I'm going to need to ask you a question. I have a problem with such and such. Why are they coming to me? Because they watched me. And they know how I did things. And they realize Norm can be trusted with this information. He doesn't gossip. Norm goes to church. He must know some things about the Lord. You know, and so they would do that. So yes, people are watching and they do model after you too. So keep that in mind. We want to make that impact, right? We do want to do that. Last chance. Any comments or questions? What do you think about the lesson today? Useful? I hope so. I hope it was. Let's have a word of prayer then. Heavenly Father, just thank you for this example of this King Joash, Lord, and how he made it a heart thing for him to do this thing for you. And that you laid it on his heart, actually, Lord, but he followed through with that. And he was that good leader who made sure it was done correctly, and there was transparency, and we see how he was blessed in what he did. Just pray that we would take that as an example of our own lives, Lord. Lord, I pray that you'd help us to be people that give you first priority, especially in our finances, because that seems to be a hard thing for a lot of people, but we need to do that, Lord, both in our church and our own lives. Thank you for all you've done, for being with us. In your Son's name, amen. Thank you for being with us today. Great to see you guys. This is Grace Baptist Church, and my name is Norm Ellis, and this is the Adult One Bible Study. Stand by. Pastor Matthew will be next, so stay by this YouTube channel. Thank you for being here. And I was going to say something else. I got 2 more Sundays and I'll be off for a little bit. So somebody else will be teaching. I'm not sure yet who. It might be Pastor Lee. I don't know. Or so one of you guys would like to teach, let me know. Don't want to say no to somebody. And we'll be in Missouri. Or some people say misery. No, I'm just kidding. Just kidding.